Hi, welcome to 20 Ideas using 20 fat quarters with GourmetQuilter. We're doing a series of 20 different little ideas. We started with 20 fat quarters and we're adding in some borders, bindings and other pieces of fabric to make those 20 fat quarters go the distance of 20 projects. So there's more information on the website on GourmetQuilter.com. There's a pattern if you're interested, and the pattern, it's all downloadable, so each day there's a new download with the new idea, with the new video, all those things. So in part one of the pattern we talked about cutting all the fat quarters up. So we cut them, there were labels for everything in the pattern as well. I'm pretty sure those labels are sitting here, so that we could label everything. So we cut all 20 fat quarters the same way, so that we had stacks of the 20 different fabrics cut the same, so that the idea being that for many of the projects they've got a piece of each of the 20 fat quarters in the project, so that we could spread it out that way. And then some of them we're coming back and we're using some of the pieces where we've trimmed pieces off, sometimes triangles and things, or we didn't use every piece. So we're doing a little bit of using up the bits as well, so that we really are trying very hard to use every bit of that fat quarter, or those 20 fat quarters. So in project number 10 we did a boat block, I think it was number 10, and we cut off corners when we made the boats, and so we're using some of those cutaway corners this time to do just a small project, just to show you how you can use up some of these little pieces that otherwise we're not always too sure what to do with. So when we cut away those, we had some triangles left over, and so I've pressed them open and I've just trimmed them so that they're all the same size, so that we can use them. And we're just going to make a little glasses case this time, so it's just using 6 of these little cutaways, and I just thought that was kind of fun. It's got a little snap closure in it. It also works really well as a little pencil case for things like that. I probably would use it for that as much as I would for glasses, because I'm usually wearing the glasses. However, it's good for both. So I'll go ahead and I'll show you how to make this now. So I'll pop this up on the wall behind me so that you can maybe still see it when I'm talking. So we're going to make the little panel of 6 squares there, although I've actually already made one. It's just joining them together. There's nothing hard about that. We're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I've already joined together 6 of my leftover triangle units like that. And then we just need a little piece. We're going to have a nice bright green glasses case this time. So we need to put a little strip each side, because as you can see it's like a little inset panel. So the idea being that we can just have a look at how we might use up some of the pieces that we have left from other projects at times, although we are primarily making things for the 20 fat quarters, but these are all from those same fat quarters. They're just within the same project series. It's often nice to be able to use up every little piece of something. So I'm just going to join these little sides on. So there is a pattern, and the pattern tells you all about the cutting sizes and things, which is often quite helpful to know what size to cut things, I have to say. So that's looking pretty good, and we can press that. So I'm just going to press those seams out into the green strips, and then we need to make it into a long strip. So I've got a lining and a piece of batting here, so we make it as one long piece, and that will just get folded over shortly. So we need a piece to go at the top. We're going to make something as long as the piece of batting. So this is batting, and this is another cotton fabric for a lining. It's also the piece that comes over the top, so we do see that lining as well. So we need to just join these up now, again with our 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that it makes it the right size there. So I'll go ahead and get these joined on so that I can show you the next bit. So I've got it all laid out here. I've got the lining, which is longer. I've got the batting, just a thin cotton batting, and I've got the front, so I've put my two sides on and the longer pieces there to make that up. So when we put these little snap fasteners in, it's good to have something to pull it open with, because it can be a little bit awkward to get into. So I'm suggesting that we put some little triangles in. So they're just squares folded. You might have other ways of doing it. This is the way I'm doing it this time. Just fold them in half diagonally twice basically, and then we can just sew them in when we sew those ends over. So I'm just about to show you how to do that. So they serve a purpose, they're not just decorative. So now to make the little casing ends here, we're going to just press this in just so that it's just shy of where the other fabric and the batting are, because it's got to come over and around those pieces. Onto there. And we're going to stitch that in place shortly and include the little triangle tabs. So same thing on both ends, we get both ends ready and do that at the same time. And bring that over. Now we want to position these so that they sit in underneath. We're going to stitch across this seam here, close to the edge, and we're going to stitch along here close to that edge. So we can pop this in here so that when we stitch this one, that gets included in the seam. So you want to make sure that that points pretty much in the center there. You can pop a pin in it if you want to, and when we do the other end we need to put one in there as well. So it's really just a matter, I might do a seam now, of stitching across. So we've got all these layers here. This is forming a little casing for our snap fastening. So just make sure your little triangle's staying nice and straight, because I moved everything. It looks pretty good. So I'm just going to stitch close to this edge here. So if you wanted to do any quilting on this, now would be the time to do that before we join it up into a pouch. I haven't found it necessary to do quilting, but by all means you could. And I'm just going to sew about 1/8 of an inch also from the top edge as well. That just gives it a nice little edge. So now I need to do exactly the same thing at the other end and include the other triangle. So I'll go ahead and get that done and show you what we're going to do with it next. So I've done both of my lines of stitching. I've got my little pull tabs on there. So now we just need to pop it right sides together, and we need to sew just one of these side seams. So when you do that, just make sure that it's not pleating in the corner inside there, and have your top edges level, of course. And we're just coming down doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance down one side. So when I'm doing something that opens at the top like this, quite often I'll start just a little bit down, not too far, 1/4 of an inch or 3/8 of an inch down, and I'll back stitch up to the end, just so that those threads are not sort of sitting right on that very end. And then make sure this doesn't pleat at the other end, and then just stitch all the way along. And we are going to overcast that seam, but we can do that one when we do the other one. So what I'm going to show you now though is the snap fastening. So some of you will have seen me do this before. We're using these metal, very exotic pieces of metal. They are from one of those pull-out carpenter's tape measures. And they just work really well as a little snap fastening in things like this. So we do need a little bit of masking tape, and you need some old scissors, like the workshop scissors, not your good scissors, not even your good kitchen scissors, but the workshop type scissors, the ones that really don't matter. You can cut through this tape measure really easily. I can show you, I can cut another piece off. See, it just cuts. The harder bit is that we do need to round the edges. So I have rounded one there just to show you. And this is something I would suggest that you do definitely outside, away from where people are going to walk with bare feet or anything like that, or do it into a paper bag or something to collect the bits, because sometimes they can kind of flick off. So we just need to cut to round those edges, because you don't want, that went flying. You don't want a sharp edge. It's still a little bit sharp, but make sure there's no points anywhere or jagged bits on there. And then we're just going to cover those ends with some masking tape. So I've already done the ones I'm going to use, but I'm just showing you how to do it. So you just need some masking tape to put over that. And I usually actually put in 2 layers of masking tape just because I feel that it's going to have a little bit of wear and to help it last a bit longer. So I just do it double. And I would do the same thing at the other end as well. So you need 2 pieces of metal tape. So you've got to cut 4 ends with the little rounded corners and then cover each end with the masking tape. And then as well as that, just trim off. The masking tape is rarely the right size for the measuring tape. Just trim off so that the masking tape is level. You don't have to round the corner on that, but you just want those edges to be level. So just trim anything like that off. In fact, I think I've still got one edge here to trim on this one that I'm going to use. So that's all done. So you can see that workshop scissors, you can cut the metal tape to length, and you always allow a little bit of room for it to move. So don't cut it the full length that you need. You want to give yourself probably even ½ an inch less than the distance if you're making a different size pouch or something, just so that it's got a little bit of room to move. So now that we've got them to this stage and they're ready to go, they're nearly ready to go. That's ready to go now. We can pop them inside. So I find it works best for me to have the curve facing to the outside. So I'm going to insert that into here. So above the green but under the grey, which is now double because we folded it again and again. And you can just push that inside. As you can see, there is room in there because we have got to sew that down the side, but also it just needs a little bit of room to move. It works very nicely with that little bit of space there. So you just want to pop this between the fabrics. Oops. Insert that in, push them all the way in for the moment because we want to sew this side seam now. So just the same as we've done the other one, it's a little bit bulky here, but it's really not so bad that you can't sew it. And these are quite bendy, you don't have to worry about that, as you'll find out when we turn it out the right way. They do get bent in that process. So I'll go ahead and stitch this side seam just the same as I've done on the other side. Start a little bit down, back up, and come all the way down. Nearly done, in fact. So now I'm going to overcast those seams with a zigzag stitch, so I need to set my machine up for that. And just before I do that, I'm just going to trim those seams. So I'm not really trying to trim them any smaller, I just want them tidy so that there's a nice edge to zigzag over. The zigzag helps stop things fraying when we've got a seam like that sitting there. And if you just get a nice straight edge, it zigzags very nicely for us. So I'll go ahead and get my machine set up with the zigzag and show you what I'm doing with that. So I've already zigzagged this edge. You can see that it's got a nice little overcast edge there. So I've got a foot on that allows my needle to swing, and I've set it to zigzag on the sewing machine. And we can sew along, just push the little metal tape pieces away as far as possible, and then we can start sewing. And the same as I did when I was doing the side seam, I just start down a little bit and back up, just so that we can end up getting that end covered without threads sticking out. And then you just want it so that it zigs over the edge of the fabric. And there's just one more little thing. If you want to have the little corners like I've done there, we just need to do that before we turn it out the right way. Let's trim off those threads. And that's quite simply done. We need to just open those corners out. It's the little paper bag style corners. It's only just a little bit. So if you just open it out so that the fold comes down to the point, and we're just going to stitch maybe just ½ an inch away from the point across that corner. Just make sure it's not all pleated up in there. It shouldn't be. Just sometimes it wants to be contrary. And just with your straight stitch, just go straight across. Oops. That corner, it's just moving. Here we go. So as I said, only about 1/2 inch away from the point. And we'll do the other corner, and then we'll have fun turning it out. I think we're pretty much all done now. So I don't think there's any need to cut those corners off. They're so tiny they can sit inside. You can cut them off if you want to. So now we just need to turn it out the right way. So now we've got to wrestle with this tape measure, but it won't come to any harm. It's amazingly good at tolerating all this manipulation. I'm just got to push that out. Probably a little tool would have been helpful, but I haven't got one here today. There we go. Push out the little corners. Oh, and it's looking a little scrunched, so we might give it a little bit of an iron, but it's looking pretty good. And that'll settle when it's had time to breathe. Yeah, that's all looking pretty good to me. So there's that little glasses case, pencil case, whatever it is that you decide that you'd like to use it for, using again part of our fat quarters here. So I thought that was just a fun little project to include. Again, using up some of the pieces. We're also using up small pieces of batting that are left over, and often just a small amount of fabric. So sometimes these little projects are great for just using up all sorts of things, including our 20 fat quarters. So that was part of our fat quarter ideas, and that was number 16. So I will see you again with fat quarter idea number 17.